All right, welcome to another episode of A Podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted. And today we have the lovely Leanne Taylor joining us today to share her story. And I'm super excited to dive into this with you because we participate in similar sports. Number one, you're at a way higher level than me. It's very obvious in the pool that we train in how speedy you are. So I'm excited to get into it. And Leanne, thanks for making time to join us on the podcast today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. How about, do you want to give the listener a little background to your story? And that's probably a big question, but I'll maybe just introduce yourself a little bit here, and then we'll get into some of the questions and dive into it.
Sure. Yeah. If we back way up, I was actually born in England, and my family moved to Canada when I was 10. We moved to Ontario, where I had a fairly typical, really active lifestyle. My parents lived in cottage country, so we were like skiing and snowboarding, and we had the opportunity to, ride our bikes to the beach and just like really live like that kind of very Ontario childhood, it feels like. And I think parts of Manitoba definitely have that cottage culture as well. And then I moved to Manitoba as an adult when I suppose an adult, I didn't feel like one at the time. When I got a job at a pharmaceutical company here called Medicure. And so I moved here when I was 23 and met my now husband here. And that's why I'm still in Manitoba. I feel like you move for a job and stay for a guy fairly often. And so when he and I were living together in 2018, and we had taken up mountain biking, which I was comfortable on a bike. I'd done a bit of triathlon in undergrad. And so we went for a bike ride together at the Bison Butte, which is a trail that's close to our houses. And I was in a bike accident where I went over the handlebars on my bike and landed on my back and sustained a spinal cord injury at T11. And so following that, I was completely paralyzed from the waist down and had to really try to find things in my life that made me happy and made me excited again. And so my number one goal being injured, which we actually talked about in the hospital, was to just build a lifestyle that we wouldn't go back and undo my injury if we could, which felt like a really ambitious goal at different times in the journey. And there were times when I was like anybody, like I would do anything to walk again. But over time, I'm 6 years post-injury now, and found a lot of things that really brought me a lot of joy. One of those things was paratriathlon. And so over time, I set a goal for myself to compete in my first paratriathlon 8 months after I was injured, and did that in Sarasota, Florida. And you say you're not very fast. I think you probably would have beat me. It wasn't pretty. But I did my first race and I really fell in love with the sport. And so now about a month ago on September 2nd, I competed in my first Paralympics and came home with a bronze. So really incredible experience.
That is, and congratulations on that side. I know our team trains in the same pool facility as you. And I know it's like a buzz in our group chat.
I love that.
Yeah, we were definitely, aware. I don't know if I actually opened up and said that before we got in the episode, but yeah, huge congrats there.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I guess on how important has it been through this journey, the community around you? Because I feel like you have a lot of support.
Yeah.
The outside interviews as well. So what's that been like?
The community has been incredible. I don't think that I would have ever expected this kind of support that I got from sort of so many different levels. And I think it really made me feel very connected to being a Manitoba athlete, although I'm not originally from Manitoba. And so that's definitely why I kind of claim proudly my hometown as being living in Winnipeg, and now I live in Oak Bluff. So even more specifically this community, but the amount of support that we got kind of from day one from the community was incredible. I remember really distinctly the first time that I went into the director of Triathlon Manitoba's office and told him I wanted to do a triathlon. And I didn't even know really if wheelchair athletes did triathlons. And I thought maybe he was going to laugh or like think it was ridiculous. And I've never seen somebody like so fired up about someone else's dream. And I think that was like one of the moments when I was like, this community is really special.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. Um, I guess what was the first step after you had that meeting there, and how did you get started in it?
I had a meeting with Carolyn Murray, who is the head coach of paratriathlon in Canada. There really at the time wasn't any other level than that. So that was the person who was coaching like our Paralympic gold medalists was the person that was like talking to the first athlete who said like, can I actually do a triathlon as a wheelchair user? Like this is my question. And so it's been a really incredible journey to actually go through that with her. We recently did kind of like a debrief on the games, and that was the start of the conversation was like, remember when I phoned you and asked you like if I could even do one of these?
That's awesome. And then what was the first step of training? I mean,
What's
obviously you go
next?
through a traumatic event and then you kind of make yourself a promise 8 months later, you're going to do one of these things. Yeah. What happened? What was the first step?
When I was still in the hospital, there was a recreation therapist. Her name was Taylor, and she connected me with Colin Matheson, who is a local athlete, went to the Paralympics for wheelchair racing. And so I was still an inpatient, and we went to the track at the U of M to watch Colin do a training session in his racing chair. And Colin, I feel like, had so much more insight than I did at the time. And so he had brought an extra racing chair and was like, you could just sit in it. Like you just see how it feels. And then he was like, oh, you could just push it a little bit, like kind of see. And then by the end, me and Colin are like doing laps of the track together. And it was one of those times when, you know, when you're in a workout and like your heart rate's elevated and you just get that joy from it, that runner's high or whatever, like that feeling where you're like, oh yeah, this is great. That was the first time since my injury that I had that feeling. And so after doing that, I was like, oh, parasport is the thing. This is awesome. And something about swimming, I think, was really appealing too, because it's just so freeing as a wheelchair user that you can very similarly move through the water as an able-bodied athlete. And so triathlon just really made sense.
Very cool. Okay, this is something we didn't talk about before, but I think I know enough of the differences between the bikes, I guess, or chairs.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the major difference for listener here? Because I think not everyone is aware of between like the bike and then I guess the run portion of the triathlon. It's a hard time to get it, but
so paratriathlon does a sprint distance triathlon at the Olympic level. So we do a 750-meter swim and then a 20K bike, which athletes in my disability class do that in a hand cycle. So it almost looks like you're laying down in it because it's recumbent to be really aero. And then the similarity between that and the bike is that it has gears. So it has like the mechanical advantage of gears in the same way that a bike typically would.
right.
And if you're a bike nerd at all, it's basically a bike flipped upside down in terms of like mechanics.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've seen them all about it that way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like if you're working on a bike and you're trying to understand the logic of a hand cycle, it's just an upside down bike. And so then on the run, we do a 5K run, and most wheelchair athletes I think still say run, but obviously we're not running. We do it in a racing wheelchair, which doesn't look like a daily wheelchair, but is similar in the sense that you're just pushing directly on the wheels to propel it rather than the bike where there's like the mechanical advantage of turning the cranks to make it go.
Right. Fantastic. What is your favorite part of the race?
This is like constantly shifting, which I think is a good thing. I started off and I just vibed with the run portion. Like me and my racing wheelchair were like friends. I was cool. I liked it. But over time, I've like started to get into the things I liked the least. So I definitely liked the bike the least at first. And now I think I've just like come to a place where I'm comfortable enough with it that I think maybe it's my favorite.
Is the biking part? Did I get it right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right. Cool. I know, like, I mean, between, anyone doing triathlons, it's like a battle. Someone's like favorite part of the race is always up for discussion of which part do you like the best. But that's awesome.
The exciting thing about the bike is because it's longer, there's more opportunity to like chase athletes and change position. And a lot of the time we start at a similar time to the male athletes. And so my new favorite thing is to like pick because the men will start first and then we'll potentially catch up. And so chasing the male athletes and trying to beat the male athletes on the bike is like my new favorite activity.
Awesome.
It's like some good competitive inspo.
Really well, obviously that, athletic mentality is very strong in you, and thinking of chasing down someone. I mean, that is a very common thing, I think, within cycling as a general, whether it be on a path, on a road, whatever. You're always trying to like get up to that next, whatever it is, to beat that person that, as you play, you're like, if I don't make it to this post or whatever, that's my goal to chase down that person there. So
yeah, it's a fun way to like gauge yourself against someone else.
Absolutely. And how were the games? I think that's a good segue for where you're talking right now, but you had a fantastic opportunity. Yeah. You performed very well there. What was that like?
I have just such incredibly mixed feelings about the games, because I went in feeling very fit and very prepared, which is a new thing for this year. So I had a big year this year compared to previous. So I was feeling quite confident going in, and expecting a podium, and really wanting to kind of question as to whether I could be second or third. I think that in my field anyway, the athlete who has consistently won for the last few years is like a little bit out of reach maybe for me at this time, but for sure I was thinking second or third. And then the day before the race, I got really sick. And so I was feeling terrible, but also just so heartbroken that I had prepared for this for like 6 years and was potentially going to do it with less than what I feel like I should have come with. And so even like we were walking down to the race site and I threw up on the sidewalk. So sorry, spectators who then had to stand there. It's a rough day for me. And so then when we went to start the race, I was really nervous, not so much about like what I was capable of, but that I wouldn't perform to my own expectations on the day. And it's really heartbreaking to think that like you get one shot. And so how you come on that day is going to kind of define your career in sport to some extent, or at least like your expectations for that day. And I started off like we're swimming in the Seine, which is cool and amazing. And it also has a significant current. So we had to plan a really specific route to take in the Seine to be in the area that's lower current. So if you swam like right along the wall, it was really advantageous if you swam more toward the middle of the river, the current would be really strong and quite difficult to like make much progress, honestly. And so, yeah. And so the swim was quite good, but I think, again, feeling like less than my maximum was really difficult because I trusted myself less against the current. And so normally I would trust like I can swim at this speed, the current is this speed, it's no problem, like I'm going to be fine. And so the swim wasn't the swim that I'm used to, but it was okay. And then when we got out onto the bike, I was just feeling so low energy. So the bike itself was really tough for me mentally to be like in a position that was very different from where I usually am. And I was having to challenge passes from athletes that normally would not be in that situation. So part of you, it's really hard mentally to be like challenging a pass for a position that you don't want to be in. And the other part of you is like, I absolutely have to challenge this pass because I have to beat this athlete. Like this is where I should be in this race. And so definitely it was like kind of a mental battle of like trying to stay in the position to be within striking distance from the podium. And then once we got onto the run, that used to be my answer as to like what my favorite part was, because it's kind of my jam. Like I just feel confident there. And so once I got onto the run, I was still actually feeling super depleted, and I was like kind of battling the urge to puke. And being from Oak Bluff, I was like, oh my God, I can't puke in this race. We're going to be only thing Oak Bluff will be known for is like the triathletes, the barf.
Yes.
And so then one of the athletes actually from Mexico came up beside me on the run course, and she was like yelling at me and like yelling my name. And I was so confused, and I was like, oh, this part of the course is a little bit thin. So maybe she's like trying to pass and I'm like taking up too much space. But then I moved over and I was like, there's space. I don't know what's going on. And she's still yelling at me. And so then we turned the corner onto like a section that's really quite wide. And this is still going on. She's still like, come on, Leanne, like, come on. Like, what are you doing? You can do this. And I was like, this is so strange. Anyways, so then I was like, well, I have to do an acceleration here. Like this girl is like trying to, I don't know what she's trying to do, but like, I'm going to react to what she's saying. And so I did an acceleration and then started to like, you can probably relate to this, like speed just like does something to you. Like you find something, some energy that you didn't know you had. And so doing that acceleration just kind of like got me going. And then I was able to have a run that was more in line with what I had expected to do on the day. And then when I crossed the finish line, and on the course, my coach has like a megaphone because it's hard to hear her because it was so popular, I guess, the event. Like there's tons of people watching, which is really cool.
Yeah.
She tells me that I'm in third, like on her megaphone, but I wasn't totally sure that I believed her because I was like, because an athlete actually had like a mechanical or crash, I'm not quite sure, like had a problem and an athlete that was ahead of me. And
Okay.
so I wasn't sure whether that was true or not, but I was like, okay, the only reason she would tell me this is because she wants me to hold this position. So like whether I'm in third or not, the coach says stay here, so I'm gonna stay here. And so the athletes behind me were like 7 seconds back and 20 seconds back. And so the whole rest of the run, I think I had 2 laps left. I was like, just stay here. That's all.
Right.
Yeah. Like, you don't want to get too excited. And it's fairly technical run. So you don't want to get too excited and crash. You just want to like just stay right here. And so then when I crossed the finish line, my husband could be there. And so he confirmed to me that I was in third. And then I just started sobbing, but more so kind of for 2 reasons. Like partly I was just so touched that that Mexican athlete would like cheer for me and would like recognize that I was kind of underperforming and be like, come on, girl, let's go. And then the other side of me, I felt so sick. And I was like, thank God it's over. I was just so happy it was done.
That is a really touching moment, though, to have another athlete like
Yeah.
fun and very encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all. That sounds like a very cool finish. What did it feel like crossing the line and hearing that news?
It was really amazing. I think it was just one of those things where you like set out to do something, but I don't know if you like really ever believe that it's possible. Like you kind of are like, yeah, I'm going to podium. And I had started to say it in interviews and to my friends. Like I started to be like, yeah, that's my goal. I'm going to podium. But I feel like there's always part of me that was like, sure you are. And so to actually do it was just like really incredible. And I felt like I had approached the games really specifically wanting it to mean something to me. And so what I had thought was that you don't know how you're going to do in the games. All kinds of things happen and you can leave it really disappointed or had an incredible day. And there's a lot you can do to prepare. But when it comes down to it, like anything can happen on the day, especially in triathlon. And so to me, the games had felt like an opportunity to like do my best as a thank you to all the people who had supported me to get to that point. And so that was really what I was thinking about on the race course when normally I like doing triathlons, but doing a triathlon when you're sick is like, it's not fun. And so the entire time I was just thinking about like the people who had supported me to get to this point and like knowing that if I did my best race, I could look them in the eye and say like, that was what I had. And that was for you. And so that was really like what motivated me and then also made me feel so great to finish it and be like, that was for you and it's a medal.
That's awesome. And has that really like sunk in, by the way? It seems like it kind of has, but has it really like, are you still maybe a little like floating on it? Like, because that's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, that's kind of why I say it's mixed feelings because I am incredibly proud and to get a bronze medal, if you'd asked me like the day before the race, if you could tell me and know that that's how it's going to end, I would have been like, yeah, that's amazing. But then there is a little part of me that is like, but it wasn't my best performance. And I think that's something that athletes always have to like deal with and digest is that they have these expectations that are like not always obvious to people. And so it was funny because I'm like thrilled with the result and that place is amazing. And I think it's very close to the best place I could have asked for in the race. But then I look back at my race times and I'm like, oh man, what were you doing?
That's awesome. How did that compare to maybe some of your best like race times? Like how would that have been? Because I know, and that's like a huge can of worms to maybe open up with someone.
Yeah, no, it's not. I think
Yeah.
it's good to like have that conversation. I think in terms of time, like bad, it was really bad. Like I think I swam a couple minutes slower than I had wanted to, and my bike again was slower than I had wanted it to be. And as my comparison, I have been really lucky that I've been invited to train with Kendall Gretsch in the US, who came second in this race and was the previous Tokyo Paralympic champion. And she and I had noticed in the last few races that we had very often found ourselves coming into T2 together. And so one thing that you can do in a racing chair, which is really cool and fun, is you can draft really similarly to how you can on a bike. And although our race is non-drafting on the bike, they have not made that rule about the run. And so we can draft on the run. And so the moment that we really wanted to have was to work together on the run to try to catch that athlete who has won the last like 6 world championships. And so that was kind of the dream. And so ultimately that dream still would have ended with me being in third, but to have that piece missing was a bit disappointing. So we have world championships in 3 weeks, and we have our opportunity to execute our run plan then.
Very cool. And it kind of segues into the next one. Like, what's coming up next, and when is that world championship for you then?
We race in Spain on September 18th.
Awesome.
October.
Yeah. Okay. And then beyond that, are there other races coming into like the winter time here, or looking further into next year for spring?
Yeah, our season is done for 2020. Well, I'm done racing for 2024. Some athletes will race after Worlds if they're like, it's a good time to collect some points. Like if you're concerned about wanting to enter some races that maybe not every athlete is going to, that's a good time to like boost your ranking for next year. But we're not. We're lucky that we don't have to do that anymore, or this time around anyway. And so I'll race again in the new year, likely in March. There's a race in Florida that has been in Sarasota or Miami. And so that will probably be my start.
Awesome. I guess and looking into the future, are you looking to then, I guess, compete again in the next Paralympics? I mean, I know that's a few years away and you just got out of this one, but is that like a future goal too, that you're going to continue to work towards doing that in the future?
We have some ambitious future goals, which I think used to scare me and now is exciting. So we would really love to have a family, my husband and I. And so that would be kind of one of our next priorities, but obviously that we don't know exactly when that happens. And so I'm going to continue to train, and I would like to race in LA. I think it would be really incredible to do that as a mom. I think we've seen over the last couple of years with a lot of movements that sport has made towards being more mom friendly and supportive. This games was the first one that had in Paris a nursery for like moms to bring their kids into the Olympic Village. This was the first time that existed. And so I would like to use that in LA.
That's fantastic. And you know what, this is kind of segueing into my other thing. Like, what was the Village like? And like, what was that experience behind the scenes? Like the stuff that people, only hear rumors about. Like what, like I think I saw a few years ago, there was like cardboard beds for something like I don't even know what year that really was, but I mean, it's there's like very progressive thinking there in terms of some athletes are moms, and they have minis they got to take care of sight unseen when they're out at the event.
Yeah, exactly. The Village was everything they said it would be, like in every way. We loved it. We were only there for a couple of days because our team, Canada had like length of stay rules for these games. So you came in just a couple of days before your competition, and then our team actually chose to have us stay in a hotel the 2 days before the competition to be closer to the venue, because often things that you don't realize about the games is that it's usually quite a long like bus ride from the venue to the competition venue. And so for us, it was like over an hour. And so the athletes who raced, who lived in the Village on the day of the race got up at like 3 a.m. to get on the bus to like get to the race site. So it's definitely an advantage to not have to do that. And then the way our race turned out is that normally paratriathlon in the games is done on 2 separate days. So there's different classifications of athletes. And so I, for example, don't race against a visually impaired athlete. We are our own classifications, and we race for different medals. And so we usually are on separate days, but these games, they had some concerns about the weather and then some concerns about the water quality. So we ended up all getting moved to September 1st. And then we had a poor water quality read, and then we all got moved to September 2nd. And so for the athletes that were in the village, they woke up at 3 a.m. on the day of the race and the day before. And so it ended up being quite an advantage to us to actually be in our hotels and not have to deal with the logistics of the village on the race day.
Interesting. Smart move as well. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
probably a difference.
By our coaching staff.
Good job, coaches, on that one.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of like what it was like, were there cardboard beds? Yes. Did I want to bring them home? Yes. I loved them. They were the best. Like
Cool.
they were cardboard, like the base is cardboard, but then we had a mattress which was made out of like fishing wire that was kind of like coiled up a bunch so that it was like compressible, kind of.
Okay.
And then the Canadian team all had like a nice mattress topper, and it worked out. It was fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's very fun. How about the gear? I think I saw a post from.
I'm wearing some of the swag.
Oh, are you? Oh, cool.
Yeah. This is like a
nice,
just the casual stuff. But yeah, the kit was amazing. Lululemon did an incredible job. It's super cute, but they also had like a lot of accessibility features, which were really cool and impressive. And so like all of the pants came in a seated version, so that the front of the pants is basically like designed as though you're supposed to sit in them. And so the shape of them is more like for a person who's seated, and then the back of the pants is like a stretchy material so that you can like get it on, and then you're sitting on this like smooth stretchy material, but the front of the pants is like a dress pant. So it was very cool.
Very nice. I didn't think about that existing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, on this topic of clothing, since we've gone down this path a little bit here, but for the cycling side of like my triathlon world, we're always wearing like bibs and stuff, and it's to pad your butt a bit and make it a comfortable experience that way. And I'm just thinking about like your biking. Do you wear bibs and like a similar style bib when you're racing?
Yeah, it's fairly similar. So we get the same kind of bike kit. And then I actually cut out the pads from the bottom because my bike, I was really lucky to work with a prosthetist who at Anderson Orthopedic in Winnipeg, and his name's Peter, and he is the best, and he does triathlons as well. And so he just, maybe you've crossed paths. He was like absolutely jazzed when I brought my bike in to get the leg brace piece done. And so he then made like a custom pad for the entire bike. And so I cut the pad out of my bike kit, my race kit now, because my bike is like a custom pad.
Oh, awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that existed either way, or now I've learned something. Listeners probably learned something here too about are there other special features on your equipment today, I guess, like, or that maybe I didn't ask about that I should be?
Yeah. So the hand cycle comes like, it's fairly bare bones in the sense that people usually have to add like padding and things to make it fit really comfortably. And so we added leg braces basically. So my feet normally would just be kind of sitting in like stirrups, but we added custom pieces so that it can point my toes to be more aerodynamic, and then also so that it provides better support, like if you were in a crash, so that your legs are like fully protected, which has happened since I got it. So I'm glad I have it. And then the inside of those leg braces and the whole back of the bike is actually a special foam made by a company called Zote Foam. And they make this really kind of fancy antimicrobial high-end foam that has gone to space, like with NASA astronauts and things. Like it's really been used for some cool stuff, and it's on my bike. And it's really made a difference in terms of like being able to make that foam to exactly the position that we want. It's kind of like wearing an orthotic in a running shoe, so that the entire back of the bike like really just fits my body. And those things have made a big difference. And then we also made a leg brace for the swim. So if I didn't wear a leg brace in the swim, I'll show you sometime, you'll laugh. My feet are like just everywhere, like absolutely everywhere. It's just such a nightmare. And so I wear paratriathletes in the wheelchair class are always allowed to wear wetsuit pants to swim.
Okay.
And then I wear a leg brace over top of my wetsuit pants that keeps my knees together and straight. And so with that, my swimming looks a lot more like swimming with a pool boy than sometimes if you were to watch para swimming, they're not allowed any equipment like that. And so their bodies move quite differently, whereas we are able to kind of put our body in a more similar position to an able-bodied swimmer.
Very interesting. Yeah, and you're okay. Wait, now on the swimming segue, or where this question is probably going, but we were talking about this before, and I was curious to know, what do you think about when you're swimming? Because my brain goes to La La Land in the morning. It's very meditative, and not training for something such as your level. It's just more keeping up the routine. Like we were kind of chatting before about keeping up with that cardio and the breathing habits and stuff. But what goes through your head when you're training? And I know that you're probably doing more advanced stuff than my base level things, but what's going through the noggin when you're swimming?
I'm actually originally naturally in a really similar boat as you. Like, I just love to be like in the middle of a session and be like completely off with the fairies. I think it's great. And so that's my default. And I had to work a little bit with sports psych to like figure out when it's okay to do that and when you have to be like paying attention. And so in the past, I think that it's like a really unique kind of mental place that you're describing, where you're like, it's almost like you can push your body further because you're not like fully paying as much attention to what it's doing, or that's how I used to feel a lot of the time anyway. Yeah. And then I would find it was hard to like bring myself back and forth from that mode. And so I would make like mistakes in races. When I first started, I would like go the wrong way. And my coach would be like, how did this happen? And I'd be like, I was in the zone, like I was just doing the thing. And this was when I was very new, but I had to kind of like address that, like what competition brain looks like and what certain practice brain looks like. And so when we do like an aerobic session, we're like, I'm anyways just like thinking about nothing. Like I'm just like vibing, having a great time, whether it's like in the pool or on the bike. And then in the more focused sessions, I think about technique a lot. And that's uncommon, I think. I think a lot of athletes are like, once you're in the race, your like body takes over and it knows what to do. Like mine doesn't. I have to think about it.
Yeah, I would say that sometimes just kind of go in autopilot, even in like race time, even like swim specifically. The first part's a little intense. I feel like the heart's just like going, and then it's just kind of like autopilot for even that part in like race mode, which is, that's La La Land fairies, like you said. That's pretty fun. That's really cool. And what is the normal like training routine, segueing off like swim part here, but you're swimming, you're biking, and you're running within the training and on different chairs in that sense. But what does your routine look like today for keeping up with, coming from the Olympic level and, maintaining that strength and cardio that goes along with that?
Yeah. Our kind of regular training is like 2 to 3 sessions a day, like more often 2, but sometimes 3. And then we do like, I usually swim and lift weights on the same day. I had to think about it. And then I bike and run on the same day. And so that way, sometimes those are separated. And then sometimes I do a brick where I'm like going straight from the bike to the run to kind of stay in touch with that feeling. Yeah. And then we'll do like, sometimes we'll add, if I did a brick, we'll add like an aerobic session in a different sport or something like that, something that's easier. And then in terms of like hours, maybe I was at like 25 when I was at the most number of hours that I've done a week kind of thing, like maybe a little bit higher than that, but around there. And then right now we're in kind of a unique period because we're coming back from the games, and after the games, I took 2.5 weeks off and went on vacation and swam one time. And so we're kind of in a combination of like, recognizing that the most important competition this year was the games and is not world championships. But at the same time, like, would I like to get a medal at world championships? Of course. And so right now we're really just focused on like doing what I have to do between now and worlds to feel more like myself, but without getting into that point where I'm like overly fatigued, because it's kind of a touchy time to be coming from the biggest competition kind of our cycle of like the 4-year cycle to then going into another competition. So we're really just like keeping it fun right now, which I think is the best place to be, where you're like pursuing speed, but for the fun of it.
Awesome. That's a crazy routine. That's fantastic. What is like fueling up for this look like for you too? Like on the diet side of things, like do you ever struggle to eat enough?
Yeah, that's a funny question. One of my teammates and I were talking about how what we were most excited for in our break is not like being required to like just eating when we felt like it. Like we were eating at the time, like eating like a big pasta dish or something before the race. And we were just like, oh, it's going to be great when we don't have to do this every day for a little while. We work with a dietitian at Triathlon Canada who helps us to kind of have some parameters on like the number of, we don't count calories, but like some kind of idea of like the number of calories ish, or like the number of meals and the size of the carb portions and things like that, to make sure that we're getting enough. And so we kind of focus on getting enough protein and enough carbs. I think it's like I'm glad you asked the question that way, because it's very common for people to say like, oh, you're an athlete, you must be on like a really strict diet of like chicken and vegetables. And I'm like, it's 2024. Like, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Well, some of it I think comes from, because I have kind of experienced not eating enough. Actually, it was on like the reverse of whatever. I was like, oh, I should try to restrict this and stuff. And then I was just crashing on energy all the time. But as I was training so hard, I was like, well, the issue is actually not eating enough fuel. And we had some folks on the podcast to chat about parts of that too. So I'm glad I asked it in the right way. But I think a little bit of experience or hearing how it's talked about, because it's, it's so important to make sure that you're having enough. If you don't, it's a not so great experience, and you can like super affect your training, or from my experience. Anyways, it was not very good.
That's definitely our dietitian's like number one goal. I think anytime she works with any of us, like the first thing that she approaches is like, are you eating enough? And then she'll sort of look at like different vegetables and different nutrients and things that she wants you to be getting. But for sure, I think in triathlon, it's a big risk to performance to get into that stage where you're not eating enough, and then you're chronically underfueled, and then your performance really starts to plateau and it's hard to get out of. So we do a lot of like proactive work to be making sure that we're not getting into that phase. And I think that the other kind of misconception is that people think that that means like having a super strict diet. And we're more focused on like making sure you do get the things you need than having things that you're like not allowed or don't eat. So like I eat fries, like not every day, but like I eat them. It's part of my diet for sure. And I would have no hesitation in like writing a diet log for my, for our dietitian that says like French fries or ice cream or like, whatever. I think that's like a really nice direction that sport is moving towards, is like being, so that when you finish the games, like one of the questions that people ask you is like, what's the thing you're most looking forward to eat? And you're like, I eat it all the time.
Yeah, it's not as much as a brick wall anymore to like break through and be like, all right, I'm going to go, feast and famine style energy on the diet from what it used to have been. Interesting. Now, okay, you're training all these hours, diet's dialed in. What does recovery stuff look like? I mean, we see lots of stuff online nowadays about, like cold plunging or saunas and, different parts of the body taking care of everything. With yourself as an athlete nowadays, what does that look like? Or what do you, maybe nothing, I don't know. But
yeah, that's a good question. We use a lot of different techniques, but I think there's a lot to be said about how you use them. And so I'm always like happy to talk about what I do, but I feel like there's like a lot that goes into the decision to do something that doesn't just mean like you can say one athlete does it and then start doing it and get a benefit from it. But we do use like, I say cold plunge, but I'm like, I feel like there's like one thing that I mean by it and one thing that maybe some people think it means, and it's not the same to me. And so like our cold plunges are not like ice cold. Like we're not like getting in water that you're like, like your body is like dying to get out of. Like we're getting cold water, sure. But We use that a lot if we were training in heat. So we did our last like training block before the games, or one of them, in Banyoles in Spain. And it was fairly hot there, and we weren't expecting to have like a really hot race in Paris. And so we weren't trying to do a heat adaptation block. We were just training there because it was the right time zone. And so after all of our workouts, we would do like a cold plunge to return our body to like its kind of regular temperature. And so I think we use cold plunges in that way. And I also have, I don't know what they're called. It's like, you know, that like you wear it on your arms and it inflates and then you're like stuck like this. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Okay. Yes, kind of. I don't have, I wish I had like a research person on standby here.
Yeah, like tell us what this thing's called.
Yeah, I know what you're talking. They basically will put pressure on either like arms or legs, depending on what part of the body, you're trying to, I guess, what are they, like relieving blood flow?
I think that, yeah, exactly. So I think the idea is to like put compression so that in the same way as kind of like how massage works, that if you're like pressing on an area, then when you let go, the blood returns to that area. And so that's the point. And so I do wear those after some sessions, like, you know, that feeling when when your legs like want to shrivel up and you have to like unpeel them from being bent. That's when I use the arm things, when your arms are like, when you're sleeping like this and you feel like you need to like unpeel. That's when I use those.
That's a great.
Yeah, they're cool. And then otherwise, I feel like it's just like the basic boring stuff like hydration and sleep and eating enough and at the right times. Yeah.
That's really cool. How about all the places you traveled to? You just mentioned one that you kind of did like before the games, but where has the sport taken you to on the journey?
We've raced some really cool places, I'm not gonna lie. So one of my favorites, we raced in Yokohama in Japan, and we've had that race like multiple times. And it's just like a beautiful spot, and the Japanese people are very excited to have us there and treat us really well. So that's always really nice. We raced in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, which was like a place that I didn't know much about and probably otherwise wouldn't have gone. We raced in Swansea, which is in Wales in the UK. My family is still in the UK, so that's a cool race for me because I have like random British spectators, and my Canadian friends are like, who are these people? They're my people. Which is really fun. And then we raced in Montreal as well, and we raced obviously we just raced in Paris. Our next Worlds is going to be in the Gold Coast in Australia, so that'll be a new one for me.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
When is the Australian one?
The Australian one will be next fall.
Next fall. Cool. Awesome. Wait, in what part of Australia did you say this?
On the Gold Coast.
Is that on the east? I think it's on the east. Otherwise, you're going like pretty far the other way. I have been there several years ago for a wedding. It was so cool. It's people going the wrong way on the roads. The rest of it's pretty much in Canada, but hot. So I think
it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Now, Leanne, how can people follow you and follow your journey on like social medias and stuff? I know I follow you on there, but just for the listener to be able to track you down and follow the story from here.
Honestly, let me check what my Instagram handle is. I think. But I try to post a decent amount on Instagram. My handle is Leanne Taylor 8, LeaTaylor, and then the number 8. And yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. That's kind of the main way. Our races can actually be watched on a subscription service called Triathlon Live, and it's always free for the first month. So if you want to watch our World Championships, you can watch it for free. But it's in Spain, so I don't know what time of day it will be for you. Probably the middle of the night. But they save the stuff on there, so you can rewatch them after if you heard that it's a good race and worth watching. You can. Paratriathlon in general is just such a cool sport. We sort of talk more about the wheelchair class because that's what I race in. But there's athletes in our sport who are amputees who do the race with different prosthetics. And then there's athletes in the sport who are blind who do the race with a guide who they are literally tied to in the swim. And then the guide bikes on the front of a tandem bike and they ride together and then they run together. And so generally checking out paratriathlon, it's pretty amazing. I have not had anybody come to a race or watch a race who afterwards was like underwhelmed.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a really neat sport.
Yeah, that was fantastic to hear you talk about and be such an advocate for it and share your story and your journey through, pursuing sport after injury, as you described on here today. And I think that was fantastic. And I hope that someone else learned something from this as well. I learned tons from us chatting here today. Is there anything else you want to share with us today, Leanne, that we missed or something I skipped over?
No, I don't think so. It was really nice chatting with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to share this episode, and we'll probably see you sooner at the pool again here soon. So thanks so much again for carving out some time for us.
For sure. Thank you.